夠人。
Good morning, members. We have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start. Not all the deputations have arrived because of the poor weather and the heavy traffic. Let's get the public officers to join us, and when the deputations arrive, we'll give them their turn to speak. The purpose of today's meeting is to invite bazaar organizations to come here so as to conduct a review together with the administration in relation to areas requiring improvement in relation to the application procedures. I'll just check with the administration to see if the administration would like to start with some opening remarks. Otherwise, I will give the floor to the deputations. Administration will give a reply, and then the floor will be open to members for questions. The purpose of today's meeting is to have a review, so I would like to allow the deputations to speak more than once. So please give your comments succinct, and then we can have a second round of questions. I would like to welcome the team from the administration. I'm glad to see that all the relevant government departments are present. They include Professor Sophia Chen from the Food and Health Bureau, as well as Ms. Lin Wong, Mr. Lim Wing Hong from the FEHD, Mr. Popping Lam from FEHD, from from Home Affairs Department, Mr. Yan, Ms. Daisy Wong from Lands Department. Some of them are still on their way because of the traffic congestion, with Mr. Stephen Wong from Housing Department, Ms. Carol Kong from Housing Department, Mr. Hui Yam SD, Mr. Chen from FSD, another Mr. Chen also from FSD. For the FHD, they haven't sort of arrived. They haven't come despite being invited by us on a number of occasions. We have Ms. Zheng Yan from Grassroots Bazaar, Ms. Chiu Xin-ting from Community Development Alliance, and also Mr. Lee from CSSA Alliance. Ms. Wong is from the Hong Kong CSS. We've also got Ms. Pang from the North Bazaars, and Mr. Wong Yun-tai from Farmcat Limited. Some of the deputations are being held up by the traffic congestion. Some of them haven't arrived. I will certainly give them a chance to speak when they arrive. First of all, administration, would you like to start with some opening remarks? I see that the paper you've submitted is the same as the one previously given. Do you have anything new to sort of tell us? Would you like to spend a couple of minutes to tell us about the review that you have carried out? Professor Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is the 9th meeting of the subcommittee on issues relating to bazaars. On different occasions, in relation to bazaars and also the procedures involved, as well as the work of different government departments and how we have the division of labor, like the work of the FHD, etc. I am sure you have already got some understanding. So, if I may, Madam Chair, I would like to say that for bazaars, it is a neutral platform. So different bazaars in the past have been organized for different purposes. Some took the form like an arts and crafts fair. For others, like those in Sam Shui Po, they were sort of cooked food bazaars, and they were able to create jobs and promote the economy. And then for Tin Shan Bazaar in Tin Shui Wai, there is certainly an element of poverty alleviation. So I believe that the relevant policy bureaus may want to make use of bazaars as a platform to achieve their respective policy objectives. The FHB as well as the FHD will certainly tie in with their efforts. Previously, under your leadership, we have looked at ways to fine-tune the procedures and make it more facilitating. I'm sure the FHD and other departments have already heard your message loud and clear. Well, as far as the FHD is concerned, we are mainly involved in the licensing work. As you have been made aware, there is this table in relation to the details about applications for the relevant licenses, like the documents required, fees payable, and also other departments involved, etc. We've already given you the information in a table form. And lately, we have the case of Jiang Street Bazaar, and then open fire cooking was allowed or was seen, and I think we can all learn from that experience. At today's meeting, we have got representatives from different departments. I'm sure we can have a thorough discussion. Thank you, Professor Chen. Last time there was a very detailed study, and I'm sure it can be taken together with our ongoing discussion. At this stage, I would like to give the floor to the bazaar organizers who are experienced, and you can tell us about the difficulties, and then we can try to see what proposals can be made to streamline the procedures. First of all, Ms. Chiu. Let me remind you that what you speak will not be covered by the safeguards and exemptions under the Electrical Powers and Privileges Ordinance. As to the points that you need to note, a copy has been tabled in front of you. You may also want to get a copy from the security guards. Well, I would like to allow several rounds of discussion, so I will urge you to be succinct, and I will suggest that 4 minutes each. Ms. Chiu. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, you have had meetings for half a year, and you have been having dialogues with the Bureau. However, it seems that it is not getting anywhere because we've got different starting points. For the local organizations, we'd like to see a unified set of procedures so that organizations in all the 18 districts can refer to the guidelines and the procedures when we want to make applications. But then the administration is always saying that the decision will be made on a case-by-case basis. In other words, the procedures involved will differ, say, for example, depending on the license required or depending on the location involved. In this way, it will prevent the promotion of local bazaars. In 2015, Dr. Koh talked about all district-oriented and bottom-up being the approach. Samshepo, North District, Kwai Ching, Islands, Yuen Long were the 5 districts that have discussed the matter. I would like to comment on the keywords mentioned by Dr. Koh. When we talk about bottom-up, it means that the district council's support must be secured, and then the department will be willing to help in case there is district council support. What does that mean? For the 5 district councils that I've mentioned, when they discuss our proposals, it seems that they have got a different approach. Some would require a very specific proposal: when, where, the content, dry goods, wet goods, or cooked food. For Kwai Ching District Council, they would open a new sitting out area or a park in one of the housing estates to the bazaar organizers. In other words, it will be open to anybody who's interested. In other words, they won't name a specific organization to monopolize the place. But of course, it means that when you submit the documents, you need to follow the guidelines of the FHD. I think the threshold has been lowered. It means that the venue will be open to non-profit making local organizations. And then for the third category, like in the case of Farm Cat Limited, we have listened to the audio recording of the council meeting. We've also read the papers. It appears to us that the matter was not put to the vote. In other words, this council only played an advisory role. The council and council members were only providing a platform for discussion. As long as there wasn't any objection at the meeting or there weren't any strong negative views, then the government will give support. So I want to know, when we talk about bottom up, does it mean that it is tantamount to the district council member in that constituency as well as the stakeholders in that small location, like the owners corporations, estate management advisory committees or MACs, etc. I think that's the approach adopted by the district council. That is, they will put up a notice in the neighborhood. If they don't receive any strong negative comments in 14 days, then the application will be accepted and then they can proceed ahead. So when you talk about bottom up, can you be more specific? Would you define it to say no local objection and support by the relevant district council? So can you unify the procedures with what is actually meant by bottom up? Next, Ms. Wong from the Hong Kong Council on Social Services. Thank you, Chair. From the Hong Kong CSS, we have given a submission to you, hoping that the FHB and the government departments can unify the procedures, streamline the procedures, and shorten the time needed. That's the approach, that's the direction that we are promoting. Well, 9 local bazaars have been organized, 2 at housing estates like Kwun Tong and Wong Tai Sin. If I may focus on public housing estates, and we want to raise certain questions. For the 2 bazaars held, at that time we talked to the local officers of the housing department. We were told that we couldn't have cash transactions. The activities were popular with the local people, and in fact organizers and the residents said that it wasn't that convenient. I'm glad to see that green light has been given by the housing authority. There will be a standard form, there will be procedures for organizers to make use of in the application. If I may also follow this up, do all frontline officers know the procedures involved? I've got 2 forms with me. One is HD 1093C, the other is of another number. It is said that if we want to organize the bazaars, we can use the 2 forms. But we find it very strange because it doesn't carry the name bazaar. And we want to know, especially if the HD is represented here, please comment on the forms as well as the procedures, advise us about the actual steps involved. Recently, we are trying to organize a bazaar in a public housing estate in Sam Shui Po. We are told to gather local views. So a word about the procedure. The HA has asked us to work through the district council as well as the EMAC. I want to know whether you want to gather the views so as to make improvements. If that's the case, perhaps we can suggest alternative procedures. It is very time consuming to gather the local views. It's difficult to tie in with the meeting schedule. It may take 3 months, 6 months. It is not reasonable. And then a word about the fees. Last time, the HD staff said that irrespective of the scale, it will cost us $600. Can we clarify, is it going to be the fee applicable? And what about the number of days that would be available? I understand that in some cases, they could have it for more than 10 weeks. I want to have clarity. Many NGOs have told us that they would like to organize local bazaars. Many housing department venues are amenable for local bazaars. If you can unify the procedures, then it will be best, and it will be good if you can upload the information on the website for reference by all. Thank you, Ms. Wong. I think there's one point that's in relation to local consultation. I think unifying the procedures should be the minimum we are asking for. And what about the role of the district council? If the local district councillor doesn't object, would that be the sort of basis? And then Ms. Wong was saying that there might be different organizations interested. Would it be consultation first to be followed by drawing of lots? If a particular organization would like to have it for a long period of time, does it mean that it wouldn't be too good? Are you going to keep the maximum number of days available? Next, Mr. Lee Tai Shing from the CSSA Alliance. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, officers. Professor Chen has talked about the case of Century Pro. We ran it for a few times. Recently, just last Saturday, we did it within a church, and we used naked flame. I can tell you about our experience. First of all, I'd like to express our gratitude. Some frontline officers at the FHD have played the role of a coordinator, and in the past, it was uncoordinated, and a few years back, the FHD just wouldn't talk to us. Now, the FHD officers have been coordinating the work, but still, there are many government departments involved. All they can do is to refer our case to other departments. It is still very manpower intensive. Now, with the FHD, we need to have food business license, fire services, EMSD licenses, as well as the temporary place of proper entertainment license. We need to talk to the police as well. So you can see that different departments differ in their response, in their approach. Yes, if we want to organize a bazaar, we can get away, but then it is really very time-consuming and manpower-intensive, and there are just too many hurdles for us to overcome. Now, the FHD is involved. Now, the Secretariat has prepared an information note. I think it all points to the approach of unifying the procedures. Now, if we try to lay out all the different papers and paperwork needed, it will take a large table to accommodate all of them. And some forms are in English only, and it's difficult to understand. Sometimes the requirements are contradictory to each other. Now, the FSD will say that we shouldn't block the passageway, but others will say that we need to have a particular sort of buffer area to spread out the stores, and no one can tell whose view would be prevailing. And then on Saturday, everybody would just take a photograph, and then we were given the green light. I just wonder whether we should have a sort of coordinator, so that all the licensing matters can be sorted out. Now, we are professional social workers. It is still difficult for us to complete all the forms. In the long term, if we leave it in the hands of the grassroots residents, it will be more difficult. And then the organizers involved in the Century Pro Bazaar told me that they found it very, very difficult and very confusing to fill out all the forms. Now, different conditions are imposed, and sometimes they only tell us at a very late hour. We may be given only 2 days to meet the requirements. So if we're not talking about social workers, local grassroots residents would find it difficult to meet the requirements. And the fees and charges involved are quite unaffordable. I think we can refer to the Australian model, it would be a good idea to consider having a dedicated commissioner or dedicated officer to promote bazaars in Hong Kong. Thank you, Mr. Lee. If I may remind the public officers that Mr. Lee's organization is very hardworking, and they're extremely hardworking, and they've put in a lot of efforts to promote and organize bazaars. Now, his idea is that it is very difficult to meet all the requirements. Why don't we follow the Australian model so that there is a particular or a dedicated officer, so that if someone is interested in having a bazaar, then that dedicated officer will be the one-stop service, and we should also set up a fund so as to assist the prospective proponents. I hope the administration will give a reply.
The next organization will be the Yuen Long Farm Care Limited. Mr. Wang Yunjia, you have 4 minutes. Please turn the microphone. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Mr. Wang from the Farm Cat. Thanks to Secretary Ko of the ABHD, because he's very supportive of Bazaars. And next, to thank Housing Department and ABHD as the link and Tinyuj estate residents. And thanks to their support, our Yuen Long Farm Cat was able to organize a Tinyuj estate. Thinking back, why do we choose to organize a farmers bazaar there? Because last year the link has ceased the operation at market at Tinyuj Estate, and the residents will have to walk a long flight over to Tinshing Estate to the wet markets, and even further to Yuen Long to purchase fresh provisions, which take at least 30 minutes in car journey, which is very inconvenient, especially the elderly. Seeing this, the members of the Yuen Long Farm Cat hope that to organize a farmers bazaar at Tinyuj Market to help the residents, and on the other hand would help to promote local organic produce and vegetables. And so what are our advantages? Because the farms are selling their own produce, there's no intermediary cost, and at a lower cost rent, and we lower the cost and make them more affordable to benefit the residents. In the last few days, during our trial opening, what touches me the most, residents come up to me and said, since this bazaar is large, I don't have to walk so far to buy my fresh food. As one resident in a wheelchair mentioned, I could only take care of myself without having to trouble anyone else. I hope this bazaar could be extended. Their words made me feel that this farm cat is quite worthwhile. This is really just a trial basis, and with the support of the residents, I'm confident that there will be more organizations to organize their own distinct bazaar that could help their local residents. And if the government thinks this bazaar is meaningful, we can help look for a bigger venue to organize a large-scale bazaar full of Hong Kong characteristic. When I visit overseas, I see they have quite successful there, which could be used to promote tourists for another destination for them to visit, where they could buy things. And no matter how good the government policy is being, if there's someone deliberately trying to stir up trouble, even sound policy could be useless, because it's one member, and social media had maliciously hijacked our farm cat plans and accusing us of having privileges. We're merely helping the farmers to sell their produce. We don't have any pecuniary interest in it. If you see the whole plan, we actually have to subsidize 5 figures, and hope that the public could see clearly which are the ones could really be helping the grassroots farmers to making slightly more income, unlike some other members who claim to help the farmers and yet destroy the farmers bazaar. So that make me quite frustrated. Not only we hope that we can organize a bazaar, I hope that that residents in every district could organize their own bazaar. That would make 100 flowers blossom. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong. And the HG green lighting of the bazaar is a rather commendable move. And maybe at a time we could have Mr. Wong to supplement to see way of improvement for HG. And another representative is still not absent due to traffic delays. That's Ms. Ng. So we would wait for Mr. Ng before passing on to administration to respond. So we will wait for Mrs. Pang to speak. Now we have Mr. Ng first. Good morning, all. Grassroots Alliance have been pushing for a bazaar policy. There are only just three components. First of all, would be have an interdepartmental platform of a uniform application procedure, and make public the checklist of available sites. Of all these meetings, like Ms. Chen said, it seems to the dots are not that connected. So what are we missing? I'm still thinking about this. Just heard from the organizer Cooked Bazaar said that they feel that the guidelines are confusing. And last time we exchanged for different documents, it seems to be very exhausting. And in the short term, we could think of assigning a designated bazaar officer to reduce administrative costs. And for the long run, is it possible to set up a working group, even high authority in VHD, to coordinate all the procedures? Because we found that FHB, though as I said, been trying very hard to coordinate. It's just yet it doesn't have the authority to control, or rather to work with FSD and EMSD procedures. So there seems to be no way to make this department help the grassroots. Hope there is a secretary level working group, and hope that the new CE designate could be more effective in promoting bazaar policy. And for the bottoms-up approach, is a rather vague concept, and our organization, when trying to get bazaars in past year, we have no idea what it actually meant for. So, judging for experience when we organize bazaar in different districts, we can tell you that when there's no objection from the DC and it's giving 14 days notice as a rather good solution, it seems to not be accepted or not be aware about it. So now that we have told you that how we are able to state in black and white that a uniform application procedure is the way to go, because would not like to organize bazaars rather ambiguously. We'd like to obtain local support and your support to make these bazaars very successful in making more organizations more willing to organize them. As for the seed funding, we heard the Yunlang Farm Cat when we'd like to help the grassroots and hoping to giving more options for shopping. And there's some stall owners giving them room to operate. It's such a simple request, and for such well-intentioned, so there seems to be a lack of support, because the organizations are on our own and actually given space for storage, which involve paying for rent and for purchasing hardware and expense, as well as buy fire extinguishers. So we hope that seed funding will be provided to support NGO organizations to conduct bazaars regularly. And finally, the FHB had initially stated that able to coordinate a lot of things, and today the LCSD representative is missing. Even though they had provided a form, we're not aware or not able to organize it regularly, just probably once a year. And it's a procedure on the consultation on the right forms of how the LCSD would able to treat these applications leniently, as does demonstrate the need for a uniform application procedure. I hope that Undersecretary Chen could state in black and white our document to respond to this. I actually prepared something. This is actually a bowl of fish balls. Audio feed lost. That's the end of my deputation. Probably Professor Wooden Chen accepting a bowl of fish bowls. Okay, the HG representative just arrived. Maybe I just gave you the overview of the arguments on HG, so just to give you something to respond to. And the attending representatives that the frontline staff are still not too familiar with you giving the green light to organize bazaars in public housing estates. So rather is to be internal briefings or to formulate relevant forms to let them familiar with helping these organizations to organize bazaars. And secondly, in terms of the procedure, would you have if there's no opposition from the local DC member concerned, and then the HG would accept application without consulting entire DC. And when applying application by different organizations, as understandably popular, instead of drawing up lots and coordination, and some of the project would have given a limit, would be a week or months to allow different organizations to rotate. And for the cost, would you be able to reduce that? You mentioned is $600, and could you explain which $600 will be enough? And would like to thank the attending organization to express their relevant views. I would like to thank the administration to give a brief response. I will hand over to members for questionings. Maybe after Secretary Chan respond, maybe HAD could respond whether there will be a designated an official, and rather there will be any relevant response from other departments. So now we have Professor Chan. And thank you, Chairman, and thank for the representatives to express their views. I think a number of them I quite met before. First, I've said that we have quite a few number of meetings, and from what I've heard, I feel that you agree that something had been moving, and hope there will be more progress. And some of the issues, some of them we feel there's seems to be not much progress. That I heard from you. And seeing from the colleagues' work and leadership of the chairman, and for the item being discussed, I feel progress had indeed been made, and it's actually come in many directions. Some of them, there's been less cooked food, and now there's more cooked food, and some of the procedures, and be more green light being given. This, I see that as progress. And on the matter principle, and for FEHD and FHB, and on the statutory powers given to the other departments, that could not be changed. And on this bottoms-up district-led approach, that I can have something to say. We have a lot of discussion among themselves. On one hand, we feel that seeing from the different bazaars, their mode of operation and their purpose are different. Some that, like Mr. Wang's, more like a farmer's market, morely to benefit the farmers and hoping them to have a greater participation. Some of them are more for the building the district economy and for poverty alleviation. As this case-in-case approach had its merits, and furthermore, and on district-led, and perhaps previously, we had experience of different bazaar, especially in the last few years. We found that at the district level, there are different voices in the district. On one hand, there are some who like bazaars to be happening, and some of them felt that bazaars were probably not the best thing happening, especially for the merchants or those who think they would cause disturbance, nuisances. We need to balance both side of views, and at the district council as a platform and with giving the power and had the responsibility to balance such views. And on the part of ABHD, it was mainly to do with issuing licenses and to ensure that the bazaars comply on the food hygiene and safety matters, and whether at the local level or over the district council commissions, maybe that I leave that to HAD, because at this district have their own way of handling things, on how to express support. And as for on the speaking of, as HAD is rather simple. Once the district board gave the support, they would start their coordinator mechanism and begin working. As for HD, I would let them to answer. And with standardizing procedures, on ABHD had done some kind of work, and if there's some yet to be satisfied, there could be further room for improvement. For example, they provided some sort of a checklist in hoping to provide a quick glance. As for the large trail of paperwork that would require different departments to work together. Like I said, each department were given their statutory powers under the relevant ordinance, and in their view, they would need to obtain the relevant information to ensure that they have done their role properly. And from the overall complexity level, because each department had their own respective ordinance, that for FEHD, it should not do, exceed its ambit and telling what the departments what to do. That will be impossible. And hope the representatives do understand our dilemma. And for the role of the DHS coordinator, we would like to see how that could improve the work. So that will be all for me for now. I hope HHD and HD to respond.
Thank you, Professor Chen. I'm sure the organizers are aware of your difficulties. That's why they are proposing a dedicated coordinator to carry out the work. Now, they have wondered if the HAD can come up with a dedicated coordinator. In Australia, there is indeed this markets coordinator helping the proponent to fill out the forms so that they're not alone. Mr. Yam, well, in the course of procedures, in the course of application, different sorts of licenses are involved, like food licenses, temporary licenses, and also fire services departments approvals. As the Undersecretary, Professor Chen, has said, different departments have their own remit, and they have to come up with their own professional judgment. The HAD doesn't take part in their decision-making process, so I don't think it's quite right for us to coordinate because we're not involved in the vetting procedures. And then it was said that the FHD has said that the district council's support would be needed before the proposal can be taken forward. Well, there's a requirement from the FHD. Now, if the FHD says that is the district council's support is required, then it is up to the DC itself to say whether it will take the form of the support of a DC member, a committee under the council, or some other forms. Well, some district councils will set up a committee to look into the bazaar proposals. Currently, we haven't got any standard arrangements, whether it is at the level of council, committee, or a member. It's up to district councils to make a decision based on their previous experience. Thank you. I think Mr. Yam is saying that they are following the usual practice. In other words, he hasn't got anything new. Now, regarding the role of the HAD, the role of the district councils, perhaps we can look at ways to streamline the requirements. HD, can you tell us in what ways have you streamlined the application procedures? Thank you, Madam Chair. On the part of the Housing Department, when we receive a specific proposal, we'll look at the actual circumstances of the housing estate, impact on the housing estate, environmental hygiene impacts, as well as possible obstruction. We'll be facilitating, we will help the proponent to approach the relevant Estate Management Advisory Committee and the stakeholders to carrying out a consultation exercise. If a land lease or a DMC is involved, then the HD will also help the proponent in getting the views of the other stakeholders as well as the approval. And then we need the local community and we need the district council to say yes. Now, you want to know whether our frontline staff officers are aware of the procedures involved and do they know how to help you in coming up with the relevant papers. We have a mechanism to help the organizers. In our estate office, we have got the application forms. We have also got clear guidelines for our frontline officers. If it is technically feasible and if we get the support of the DC as well as other stakeholders, then we can let it go ahead. If there is more than one applicant, according to our usual practice, the HAD does have experience in the organization of other activities. We'll resort to drawing of lots to decide on the priorities. First of all, if a few of them would like to organize an activity at the same place during the same period of time, we'll try to sort of have them come together to talk it over. If that fails, then there will be the drawing of lots. We'll always be following government policies. Would you impose a ceiling on the total number of days permitted so that more can take part? It depends on the specific details of the different applicants. I will leave time for the deputations and the public officers to speak. Is there anyone from the administration's team wishing to give a reply? The deputations have also referred to the FSD. Would you like to give a reply? Thank you, Chair. I think the mic has been switched on. Yes, it's working. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, as far as the FSD is concerned, we have always adopted an open-mind attitude towards bazaars. The overriding principle is that as long as it doesn't compromise fire safety, then we will try to be facilitating. Thank you. All right. Sorry, speaker is off mic. Ms. Wong. There was this activity in June, and since then, the FHD and the FSD had a meeting and we had agreed on certain points. Say, for example, there shouldn't be any railings between the stores. I think we can have something like a flexible belt so as to separate one store from another. This is an example to show that we have agreed on certain arrangements. I think it's better for you to issue certain guidelines. What do you mean by having flexible separators? Well, we weren't sure about your requirements. Even 30 minutes before the starting time of 4:30, the two departments weren't able to come to an agreement. Well, I don't think you need to worry. In future, we are going to reduce it to writing. I think you need to talk to the organizers as well. because you may not be aware of our experience on the ground. I think it's better to give the floor to the public officers and then you can give a reply. Among departments, we hold talks. Your input is also important. We ought to let you know what we have decided. Yes, perhaps we can make arrangements so that the organizers can also come to meet us. If you can come up with better solutions, I'm sure we'll listen to you. Now, you have agreed on something, but you haven't told the organizers. I think the best way to go about it is to get the departments to sit down with the organizers. You refused to do so in the past. Now, let's hope that in future, at the time of application, departments are willing to sit down with the proponents. Now, we have had some preliminary replies from the public officers. Now, I open the floor to members to see if you have got any questions. Mr. Leng Yu-chung. Just now, the organizers, the deputations have said that they would like to see the procedures being streamlined. Of course, I welcome that. However, it has been said that as long as the local DC member supports, it will be fine. But we all know that local affairs have become seriously politicized. It means that if a DC member objects, then you won't be able to do it. Perhaps other departments do not object, and yet as long as the local DC member or a DC member objects, then you will not be able to go ahead. So Mr. Leung is wondering whether perhaps if the local DC member stands in the way, then you can't get it. Now, the district council is merely an advisory body. In other words, the final decision power rests with the bureau or the department. From the experience of the 5 district councils, they had different procedures involved when it came to vetting and approving. Now, the question of bazaar is something new, so I don't think we can follow the usual practice as mentioned by the HAD. And then some organizers are at a loss as to which committee of a particular DC they should approach. Now, all the DC members are supposed to be equal. The North District representative hasn't arrived. I want to tell you why the North District has yet to get its first bazaar. Because the FHD has said that even though a panel has agreed to hold a bazaar, they haven't named a specific one. So I'm afraid this will be the stumbling block. So when you talk about local support, what actually is meant by local support? Whether we talk about the DC or the DC members, well, we know that local politics is very complicated. If you must secure the district council support before you can get it, then maybe they will say yes to organization A but no to organization B. If you have to get a clear support from the DC or the DC member before you can apply, I don't think it is good. Now, if an organization can meet the requirements of other departments, I think the organization should be approved. I would say that yes, perhaps we can take turns to use the venue. Things are just getting too politicized. So make it clear. When you talk about the DC's agreement, what do you mean? Agreeing to that specific organization or agreeing to that place being used as a venue for bazaar? I think the political element is something you can't ignore. As to whose support in the district council that we are referring to, I think that's the question. FHD, yes, district councils do vary. Let's come back to the case of the North District. We've been telling the applicants that there is a proposal and the district council would like to get the specific details. We understand the background. Now, for a particular venue, it may be suitable for a bazaar under a particular set of conditions. But then if you want to have cooked food in the form of a night bazaar, it may generate noise nuisance. Now, I think it is different from giving a blanket approval for a particular venue. I think that's the crux of the matter, and therefore they want to know the specifics about a proposal. If there isn't any special reason, they will say yes to the application. I don't think departments should shirk the responsibility. I think you need to take care of all the matters involved, pedestrian flow, noise, transport and traffic and fire safety, etc. I think you need to consider the views of other government departments. If all departments have said yes and yet the DC saying no, then are you saying that you will refuse the application? I find it most problematic. And
I think district politics are quite complicated. Yes, under this. District council could only serve as a reference. For example, it said I'm worried about the noise. Could the department could be more rigorous, asking the organizers to do better on that front. That the perspective they offered could be considered. However, the final decision should not rest with them. So, if the DC objected, does that mean that you would reject such application? Is that what you mean? I'll just let me just supplement to Mr. Liang. But the organizations hope to do this because at different DCs they operate differently, and for a decision should rest with the government departments. So how do we achieve that? Achieve the bottoms up with district support? We did adopt the past practice of the situation of an HAD notified the member concerned, which he has concerns whether it be noise or the spacing or the concerns of the local residents, and the organization had take note of these concerns and able to meet the demands, and the administration would help with this bazaars. This can come with a minimum procedure. So would that become standardized? So maybe I'll let Mr. Fox to respond, and we have some other members questioning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when we receive opinions from the DCs, we will consider on a case-by-case basis. For example, would you consult whether it could be the IRID alpha, what are the concerns, and what could be done. And first, we should first seek the support for the views of the DC before proceeding. Thus, so what constitutes DC support? So does that, if there's no support spelled on DC, does that mean don't we no deal? So I just want to clarify from him. If there's no support from DC, do we not approve such applications, Mr. Fox? Let me put it this way. There's to be a reason why the DC would not support. So when you consider its grounds, it's not necessarily automatic rejections. We need to see what are the grounds of objections are. So on the grounds of objections, if the organizer is able to resolve that, so what would happen? Chairman, maybe like this. This is a bottoms-up and district-led, and this is our principle. Thus, FEHD colleagues must obtain the DC support before kickstarting the procedures. And of course, the DC support doesn't mean that they would free of concern. If the raise of concerns and out to communications, that could still go ahead, and for the support from DC, and for the composition of support from DC level, and the HAD representative has said that it's quite difficult to make it to go through which subcommittee. So from the FHC's perspective, so when we get the green light of the DC, they would initiate on the relevant procedures. Thank you, Chairman. I have to ask me a question. So if the DC would not support, reject this, so what would happen? And from past experience, the application would go nowhere. However, this is a worthwhile point, and this committee hopes to have a detailed discussion of what constitutes bottom up and what is support from DC and what form of support and what does it mean that I'm not supporting. And Mr. Leung had provided some interesting inquiries, so maybe we did leave that for the second round of questioning, and the deputy representatives with shared experience. Next, pass on members, Dr. Yim. And the applied organizations demands were clear that the government departments must inform what are the procedures and eligibility criteria. And from what I heard, the departments hiding under a shield of a case-by-case cases and their respective proposals. I think this is misleading. You said you have to consider the proposal whether they would comply to relevant requirements. As for instead of saying this case by case, the proposal on the case by cases, there seems to be a overreach of power because there's no one to supervise, scrutinize whether you exercise your power fairly, and the decision is rather opaque. There's no way of knowing what sort of criteria you're determining to accept to reject different organizations. There's no way to scrutinize that because it's completely opaque. That to decide on what set of criteria, but rather than saying that depending on the proposals of different applicants, and for the public policy, I such suggestions that the decision-making process should be transparent to let the public knows that the following criteria have been considered that this application was rejected on such grounds, and how that it would stop consisting of using case by case as a shield. Professor Chan, so just let me clarify that on the part of FBHD, just like Mr. Yu has said, we have to see on the proposal could attain the relevant requirements. It's more like a checklist that if you feel that that'll be fine. Although if you can't fulfill them, then we'll be aware. And on FHD, this is how the FHD practice, and the department can respond. And I would like the HC to respond because it's the hardest to know your decision-making process. Thank you, Dr. Yim. And on HC on different occasions, and as well as on this committee and as the panel housing, and I mentioned many times that the HD vetting would require a concrete proposal. The factors we considered would involve whether there will be a land lease as well as the deed, and whether there will be nuisance to the residents, and rather to obstruct on emergency access, and whether the offerings whether there will be fresh provisions, and to meet the food hygiene, and whether they will be affecting the residents. The floor space of public housing is designed for residents, for recreation and access. And however, we do support and also to dovetail with the government bazaar policy, and would coordinate and offer assistance to applications and thus we need to look at the specific proposals, and based on the above consideration, and I was made at the policy level whether it would affect environmental hygiene, avoid public practice, and will create nuisance to the public. We would not attract unlicensed hawkers as well. So thus, there's just no way to know what and why the applications are rejected, because the power are rested upon you. There's no way to scrutinize this. For example, what constitute nuisance? For example, we can list some examples of what this is what we call nuisance. And the definition of nuisance that could probably know because on environmental hygiene and noises is rather clear cut, and there just probably would not have Mr. Yim concerned about being opaque. And HD hope the members can understand his viewpoints. Let me just reiterate: the public's common space is for the recreation or for access of residents. And when they offer concrete proposals, we would actively consider that. And I understand the response. This is more like a review session, and all these organizations and all the stakeholders and their difficulties, and hope that everyone could step forward. And what the deputations have listed of this ambiguity. So after they filed the application, this would have to seek through DC as advisory body to offering views of the why it should or should not proceed. So what constitute nuisance? So if we meet some criteria in which I could resolve this, and I could organize a bazaar, because you mentioned have this that it would actively work together. So if it not fulfill the criteria, what are the standards? What I can do to make this happen? Now that there seems a lot of back and forth, and instead of a further follow-up, this is a rather issue of attitude, and hope the different departments could understand that the vetting powers rest upon you. To make this happen, the district opinion is important. So what constitute district opinions, and who are the district figures, and how this organization could work with them? This is right the focus of the whole issue. I hope the discussion could be more focused instead of just this back and forth, and hope to achieve a direction forward. I just have Mr. Leong. And I'll hear from Mr. Leong, and this is indeed a problem. For example, if we need to consult the DC members, especially, there could be particularly troublesome. The Yunlong farm market is a lesson. At the Yunlong DC, after 5 pan-Democrats mentions why only the farmers market allowed. So even the farmers market seems to be attack. Unfortunately, these pan-Democrats did not object at the end, because due to residents' needs, if you object to this, you will lose votes. So that's Mr. Leong's concerns are warranted. However, there's discussion on both sides. You have to actually persuade pan-Democrats to withhold objections, and hope they on the establishment side. If there was a proposal, please do not object on the spot. We need to see each application on its merits. And on the lesson on the farm market, at the HG, we need to look at a few areas. This time it's fortunate that the link did not hold objections, because the site is on a site where link have ownership. If we have objected, and as the body accepting applications, if the link objected or the other merchants objected, guy would have returned out the application. HD, Mr. Wong. And for the Chinyu estate situation, a link is one of the owners. We're required to obtain its consent. So if we objected, we cannot organize the bazaar. There's more than the DC. So there's not need to worry. You have to worry about the link or the other shop owners. So the link had a commercial complex with lots of merchants. If the objection is raised by the shop owner, so what would be your stance? So the residents are supportive of it, as learned from our survey. But for the shop operators, we're not able to obtain the support. If there's some objections, what would be your stance? Local councils as a kind of platform, because the local shop owners are worried about an impact of the business raising objections. I hope that the district council, in line with public opinion, would take into account of such situation and during such discussion. And Mr. Wang, I would like to know that HT is a body to handle the application. If you received letters from shop owners objecting to it, and during the vetting process, how would you handle these objections? So let's say the district board, DC, had already made their support, would respect the opinions of different stakeholders. If the shop owners or individual shop owners objected to the reasons, we would look at as grounds. This time actually successful. I'm not sure about the other bazaars. For the other deputations, seems to have different problem of their own. And at the public housing and state level, if this application is successful, this is found acceptable. However, the problem I waste seems to be unable to resolve. For example, for Link, you cannot say that Link did not approve. This time, the way green light doesn't mean it would approve next time. Thus, I think the government must accept this objections. We need to think about it. I hope the government representative to explain that discussion seems to be revolving around the issue of whether a DC, for example, Mr. Leung is a DC member of the Link, or the district manager is more of a advisory role, but the government is actually work to consider bazaar applications. Thus, these organizations, and if they had district support, and that you would promise to follow up. However, what's the definition of district support? It's more of an opinion. Does that mean that they have reservations? What are their grounds? And to ask this organization to address them. So, for example, if Link object to that, what are the ground of objections? And would the applied organizations to address this in making this to happen? So, instead of just what are the objections and the application is turned down. And hope the FEHD and the housing department to respond. How would you follow up? Or would you to provide details of the opinions in order to move the application forward?
Madam Chair, if I may give a reply, and then FHD may also want to supplement. Now, local support is something simple in the eyes of the FHD. It means that the support that a DC would give on any topic. So if either they say they support or they don't object, as long as this message is secured, then it will trigger the mechanism with the FHD. Sometimes they will say that yes, we support, but a number of concerns. Then the FHD will sort of take it forward. However, if there isn't any basic support, then we can't go ahead. FHD. Thank you. Most of the time, district councils will support the organization of bazaars, except very exceptional circumstances. As Mr. Wong has said, if the bazaar proposal isn't going to generate a lot of nuisance, usually there will be support. I'm going to ask the link REIT as to whether they can tell you about the details, and then the organizers can tie in with the requirements. Like the case of a Tinyu estate, a number of owners were involved, including link REIT, the DMC and the land lease would be binding. The HD is party to it, and we have to meet the requirements. It doesn't mean that there is objection, and so we would just reject it. the crux of the matter is that there is the question of the DMC and the land lease. We will work through the MAC to narrow the gap, and we will reflect the concerns to the proponent, hoping that we can sort out the differences and that we can take it forward. Well, it seems that under pressure, the public officers have come back with quite favorable replies. In a moment, I'm going to give the floor to deputations to confirm whether this is indeed the experience they have got. Claudia Mo. I think something is really tricky here. We talk about being bottom up. The district council should have a say. But having listened to the discussion, district councils can easily become a hurdle. So what are we going to do? Should the district council be respected, or should we tell the government to ignore the district council as long as the departments find it acceptable, then they can give the green light. Now, when we talk about shop operators voicing objection, if somebody else is hawking outside my shop, then of course I will say no. Now, we have the concern about traffic congestion. Now, there may be a bus route that has a low level of patronage. The bus operator is incurring a deficit, but then the local DC member will take up the fight on behalf of their own constituents and say no to the rationalization of the route. I want to pick up the point made by Professor Yu, who have interests involved. Is there any vested interest? I think everything should be made transparent. Now, you have to approve or reject an application when it is before you. You don't need to call a press conference for each and every application. You just upload the information onto the website so that everybody knows the details, and the proponent would know why the application has been rejected. District council objection, link ridge objection, or shop operators holding up a banner saying that their livelihood being jeopardized, or is it the FSD saying that the fire risk is high? I think you just tell us everything so that there's transparency, so that everybody knows all the details. Professor Chen, I think the HAD can tell us about how the district councils operate. No, I'm not asking the DC to publish the information. I would like to see coordination by the administration, like the FHD, telling us why an application hasn't been approved and the grounds for rejection. I think currently the applicant is aware of the grounds of objection, but I think you should make it public so that anybody can know. I'm merely asking you to upload the information, because in any event you have to write back to the proponent. Mr. Falk, please. Thank you, Ms. Mo. When an application has been turned down, we will certainly give the grounds and will suggest ways to meet the requirements. In most cases, upon our sort of coordination, the application will eventually be approved. As to whether information should be uploaded onto the website, a proponent may not want to have the information uploaded, and then there are many applications, a few hundred up to 1,000, because sometimes a bazaar may only last for half a day. Now, not everybody knows the background. And then you can't give all the details in writing, and then some applicants may not want the information to be uploaded. We do hold meetings with the applicants. There's a lot of to and fro, and we have good cooperation. I doubt very much. I think you are trying to talk about the privacy implication. I don't think so. I think it's a matter of public interest. Is a matter of a public affair. If you see that the party involved doesn't like it and so it won't go onto the website, you talk about manpower implications. But in any event, you have to write back to give an answer. You just scan the document and then you upload it, and then you just do it by clicking a particular icon. And then I think the internet has a lot of capacity to accommodate that. I think Ms. Mo's point is to share the experience with other prospective proponents. You can redact the names of the applicants, and you don't have to upload the form in its original format. You can list out the grounds either for objection or acceptance. Sometimes an organizer may not know why its application has been turned down, and you may not know why others have succeeded and they don't. So perhaps you can sort of summarize the observations or the findings, and it can serve the purpose. Say, for example, organization A gets it, but organization B doesn't, but then they think that they are similar. Perhaps the FSD will say that one party hasn't taken out fire insurance. You have to list out the grounds, and then it will be appealable. You can't simply say that an application has been turned down and period. I don't think that's right. So would my idea be feasible? Professor Chen. Having heard the chair as well as Ms. Mo, I think you want the process to be more transparent. Some organizations are not experienced, and they would find it helpful if they get such information. I think everybody would like to know what will make your application acceptable. I think that would be the principle, that would be the direction that the FHD can be invited to consider areas of improvement. So you do promise to carry out your review, right? I'll give the floor to the following member, Dr. Shiu. Dr. Kiki Kwok was on the list, but he's not in the conference room. I think we need to do some soul searching. This is already the 9th meeting. At first, I thought that Bazaar would be a brief topic for us to visit. At first, I thought that it would not be that difficult to get permission to organize a bazaar. Now, in fact, 7 departments are involved. In fact, the LCSD should be a party to it, but the LCSD has never agreed to come. Yes, maybe we should move a motion to reprimand the LCSD for not coming. 8 departments are involved if you want to hold a bazaar. So it is really highly complex. So it is quite scary. And for us just taking part in a meeting on bazaars, not to mention organizers who have to go through the procedures. Now, it is said that the bazaar is a neutral platform. I do agree with this statement, but I just want to add something to it. It is not just being a neutral bazaar, it is also a place for human beings. Every week, I would like to visit the markets with my family members. It's neutral, it's human. We want our daily lives be given a human touch, so we shouldn't allow it to get complicated. Now, for the Hong Kong CSS, I think the submission is well written. It is said that the administration agrees that the model should be district-led and bottom-up, but it doesn't mean that the government doesn't have a role to promote bazaars. The government should be open-minded. Even when we talk about a positive non-interventionist model, you still have to intervene in some way. I think we all agree that bazaars have a positive impact, like poverty alleviation, promoting local economy, and community building. So I just cannot understand why you allow bazaars to become so complicated. And then a department has said that the decision will be made on a case-by-case basis. We are supposed to hold a review session here, but then if we make decisions on a case-by-case basis, then there's no need for this review. Now, this is already the 9th meeting. We don't want to have the case-by-case sort of approach. I think we want to seek the common ground. If you always stress case-by-case, it is mind-boggling. Is it just that you want to be expedient, or do you want to facilitate the organizers? By adopting a case-by-case basis, does it mean that you can be flexible and to your favor? I think is it being strict or being lenient by having the case-by-case basis? I want to know about the final outcome. Would it be more facilitating or making it more difficult? Now let me come to the last point, where the district council supports Well, if you say that, you will say no. If somebody says that he objects, then it means that it will become the norm. That is, you'll always get rejected. So I think we need to sort it out. That is, in relation to bazaars, if you say that your bottom line is having reservation, then you better come clean. I want to know which department will be the coordinator. Now, someone has said that a secretary of department should head a task force. I think we are sort of exaggerating it. I think the worst thing is that nobody is willing to take up the role of coordinator. Nobody wants to be the one bearing the responsibility. That's why someone would like to see a secretary of department taking up the task.
Note that if there's no secretary involved, we would back to the ping pong about on the case-by-case basis. However, I can see that during the meeting, we can see some slight adjustments. So I would like to pass on to Professor Chan. So can we not have case-by-case? And let me use the remaining time into formulating a uniform approach as a more positive attitude in following up. No, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Xu, Dr. Xu. Just let me clarify that and looking at bottoms-up policy and district-led effort. District have their different circumstances, and this case-by-case is only it could be interpreted at such level. We've just been using this district-led model because each district had different circumstances, and each applied organization has different objectives and format has under bazaars. Thus, this case-by-case is only for them. And for Dr. Yim, as a point of concern, that when it comes to the vetting, if it becomes to case-by-case, there will be some, I think, unclear about it. Thus, we're not able to figure out how do we make a successful application. And on the part of APHD, we have clear guidelines. And even on the case-by-case application, there's actually some room and flexibility. And Mr. Falk has mentioned that, and saying from FHD's POV, we are working towards the direction of achieving this. If there are any problems, the applying organizations should address them, and once they are addressed, the application will become successful. And of course, the different departments would have their own difficulties. And from my understanding, different departments have different regulations that with the power vested upon it. Thus, they need to make sure that they should work within the power of the ordinance. And for example, we have conduct a lot of meetings and making things more transparent and clear, and for areas where rules are not familiar, there could be foster better communication. That we will work towards. And now that all the members have raised the question, now that it's my turn. And then I will pass on to the organization representatives. And different couple officials claim that that the situation in this district is different. Yes, there were different stakeholders. However, the procedure shouldn't be different in all districts. It's more of a mechanism or a regime. Thus, and asking the question like members have asked, how the HAD could play a stronger role, or rather the role be played by FEHG. This designated coordinator should be present, and for consulting the district council, would there as a clear way, for example, the local members concerned have expressed their view, or the residents have expressed their views, and if organizations are able to tie in with these views, the application should be facilitated, and there will be active communication instead of pushing the ball around, or instead actually intercept halfway. I hope the different departments or the boroughs of using this different situation district, because it's more as a because we're discussing about the mechanism. We'd like to ask HST and FEHT whether they can play the role of a coordinator and for an expressing views, and well on the mechanism and playing on a standardized role. I've been communicating with the applicants that if they can propose to be supported by the district council, and for applying the license, the ABHG will play a coordinating role to obtaining the various licenses, for example, place a public entertainment license, and so on. That have been worked well in the past. I'm not talking about the issue of licenses. When it had the support, to obtain support of the DC. So what actually is the DC support? Of course, it would count with conditions, and for the views expressed by DC, would you able to convey them to the organizations? And what is the ambit of the DC? So what is HG role in obtaining support from DC, or rather, and using a minimum issues that obtaining? I have no objections with the DC member concerned. If there's only required to obtain consent for the local DC member, they will have the instability. So it's a good thing to support, but quite could raise objections, as we feel that discussion for the DC will be more appropriate. The applicant need not to worry that for take Northern District, for example, at the upcoming meeting, we would invite the applicant to listen in so that they would know the requirements. First, what actually is DC support? Some places would require documents, some don't. Some of them actually need to state which organization as the applicant. That would be quite difficult for the applicant. And if the local DC member would have opinions, and what are the grounds for objections? This is what we call communications. You have to bring out your rationale, and if you could address them to avoid the problems and approve them. So DC is more an advisory body instead of a decision-making body. That would agreed. And basically, the site is usually with an LCSD. We'll not talk about LCSD. And a lot of locations, FEHG would be difficult to play a plot because they have their own mechanism, and HD have their own system. Could not override them. So every HD, and this way could not play the role of coordinator. And for issuing licenses, that we can do help. I'm not talking about the interdepartmental level because different departments have their own methodologies. Is about the phase of obtaining local support. So what constitute DC support? How do we like to tie in with the situation at the district level, or maybe HAD could play a coordinator role if says instead of saying out the name and nobody taking accountability. So we received the application would help them submit it to the DC. The concrete proposal also would be made clone to the members of the what, when, where, how. So that would be the basis for discussion, whether there will be any opinions from members. If not, though, that would form a support that it would need a license. They would start the license forming process. I consider that a bit abstract answer. I will not use a lot of time because the organization will be more experienced in knowing the ambiguity of such situation. We hope that we can achieve a clear hurdle. And the HED had mentioned that it had no role in this, so maybe I shall ask organizations to let them tell us what is the HED role there. I will not waste some time because everyone only have 4 minutes. So let me ask the representatives, would you have any follow-up questions to the administration? Please put up your hand. Ms. Wong? And thank the HE representative to respond on the application. And it's nice to hear that HG to say that they actually have forms and a procedure in place. And you have to have the HD 139C on the amended version on 2017 June on the application for fundraising by charity organizations. I would like to ask, is this form would be suitable for bazaar applications? Because there's some inconsistencies there. For example, paragraph 5A said no cash transaction or check payments accepted in the site. And for item 11 state that for using this application site, the cost will be free. That's in contrast to the 600,000 of administrative costs seems to be in conflict. It really state that the details of the organization instead of listing conditions for bazaars or the documentations required. Thus, I would like to ask HT, is this the form that I'm holding? And is this form and procedure were in place? Could we look at them up online? Mr. Wong. Thank you for Mr. Wong question. This is actually the applications from ordinary organizations. However, the estate offices had a form for organizations of holding temporary bazaars, that the provisions will be slightly different from the form you're holding. And that the frontline staff of the estate offices could provide such forms. This form, the organizations or the frontline staff will not be aware of the existence of such forms. Last week at the housing panels, the first time I heard about this form, thus we'd like to know where can we find the form and what is the procedure. We asked more than two housing estate office, and they don't have the maybe the chairman could be interested in obtaining the form yourself. So we need to see first what form is this, because a lot of non-profit organizations would hope to organize bazaars, and if this form could be found online, that could be very, very facilitating. Can Mr. Wong provide the form after the meeting and state where we can find them on the website? We haven't put them online. Let's say for the estate management office, why do we put it online for the time being? Because we still to iron out the details after our first bazaar. For example, the guidelines for applicants. Thus, it's still not time to put online. Is for the organizations. They could visit the estate offices, and that would explain the estate office staff could explain the details to you. So we can have a colleague to photocopy to you, so we can submit it after the meeting, and the organization president at least to know what are the name and the form number, so they could. Otherwise, they have no way to obtaining them. Well, currently we haven't assigned a number to it yet. As for the name, would that be charitable organizations to hold temporary bazaars? Would you submit them after the meetings to let the organization know what form it is? The Northern Bazaars Joint Alliance. Can we? So you have 4 minutes, Ms. Pang.
Good afternoon. For the North Bazaars, it was in 2014 that we first started to hold bazaars. So far, 16 of them. We have been fighting to have a fixed place for us at the morning market in North District. We support the idea of having a bottom-up approach, but then at the district level, the FEHD people do not know anything about bazaars. I remember that the first time that we proposed to have a bazaar, they thought it was a carnival. And then we lobbied the support of some district council members. We consulted the local people, and we got their support. In 2016, starting in September, we had the support of the DC members at one of the committees on minor works projects. They supported our proposal to have the bazaar at the morning market. We got the local support, but then the FHD district officers said that we need to amend or modify the lease. Well, we have started that particular procedure, but then the FHD district staff members are only sort of telling us about their requirements bit by bit. We never know about the full set of procedures. Now, the Bureau has been saying that the department is highly supportive of bazaars. We don't know why we have encountered so many hurdles at the district level. We would like to have a pilot scheme, but never have we succeeded. And the district officers of the FHD have said that we must have the approval of the DC, approval of our proposal, and then we can have it on a one-off basis in the form of a trial scheme. In other words, we have to write down the specific name of the organization, where we want to have it done, and then we get the support and approval of the DC. But that's for the one-off purpose. And then if we want to have the second one, then we need to approach the DC again, and it seems that they have the power to vet and approve our application. I don't know why we are sort of having this mechanism, which is tantamount to having to secure the approval of the DC. I think we should have a general scheme so that anybody who is interested can apply for it. I don't know why you are having so many hurdles. It is not a way to promote the bottom-up approach. So a question for the department. You have been telling us that it's a bottom bottom-up approach. Since 2014, we've been trying to hold a bazaar at the morning market. But so far, even now, we are in the month of June 2017, we have not been able to do so. They never tell us everything that is requested of us. They would just impose a condition or impose a requirement bit by bit. Sometimes we are told to approach the Minor Works Project Committee. Sometimes we go to another committee. Now, instead of having the local support, now it has changed to having to secure the DC's support. I think this is the crux of the matter. That is the role of the district council. If the district council is merely advisory in nature, if there is already a discussion about the general nature, then can we have a mechanism under which the DC gives approval generally, and then for a specific activity we only have to approach the local DC member? And I think this deputation as an applicant doesn't know why the application has been turned down. So I would like to get Professor Chen and also the other department to reply. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Ms. Pang has told us about the case of the North District. In a moment, the FHD can elaborate on it. Now, the bottom-up approach is a matter of principle. I think our officers have already said that when it comes to DC support, well, different DCs may have a different sort of arrangement. Sometimes you may think that a particular DC is quite generous or lenient, while others may ask for more documents. Well, the FHD would like to have local support because we have this principle of being district-led. As I have said, Madam Chair, sometimes some organizations are very keen to organize bazaars and they have good intentions. However, within the community, we need to do a balancing act because there are voices of objection. Therefore, the district council has a role to play as to how the district council is to arrive at a decision and indicate its support. I think the HAD has already said that. Perhaps you may want to simplify the procedures involved. I think we should leave it in the hands of the district council. Once the green light is given, then the FHD will actively tie in with the procedures. Now, Ms. Pang referred to the case of the North District. I would like to ask Mr. Fogg to answer. Let me sort of add a word here. Different district councils have different mechanisms, but then departments must have a clear idea about what is meant by getting the support of the DC. Now, we have seen that the FHD itself has got different views. Sometimes it would ask for a letter from the DC to say that it is in support. Others would say that, yes, I've read the minutes of the DC meeting, I know that there is support. So I think the department has this requirement that the DC support is needed, but you need to tell us in what form. Thank you, Madam Chair. Surely we can standardize the requirement here. Just now, I said that district councils will come to a decision as long as they can tell the FHD at the district level that if a meeting gives the green light, that can be regarded as support. I think we can sort of communicate with the district councils. Yes, we are quite confused. Should we approach a specific meeting, or do we need documents? Do we need anything in writing? It is just too confusing. Mr. Fogg, please also supplement. Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is that in September 2016, the District Council had a discussion as to whether the morning market was a suitable location for bazaars. There was agreement, but they didn't sort of pinpoint any specific organization. And then an applicant approached us. The Lands Department has allocated that site to the FHD for the purpose of a morning market, but never has bazaar been approved. We approached the Lands Department. The Lands Department was cooperative, relaxed the requirements, and said yes. Now we have to go back to the District Council, telling them that we are going to allow bazaars to be organized there, and we want the District Council to tell us how they would like to approach it. The District Council said that it was the first time that this was to be done, and so it's more proper to have it discussed at a meeting. And therefore we asked the proponent to submit the proposal to us for onward referral to the District Council. I know that a meeting day has been set, and we're going to invite the proponent to be an observer there, so that the organizer will know what to do in order to secure the approval. I think we all know that when it is the first case in any particular mechanism, it will take time. As to the model to be adopted, perhaps we can talk to the DC later, say for example whether we can have a simplified model. And we'll also look at the outcome of this bazaar. If it is good and there hasn't been any nuisance, no complaints, then of course the DC would like to give ongoing approval. If not, then perhaps we have to think otherwise. We can't assume that when an approval has been given to the first case, it will be regarded as ongoing approval. I don't think we can have such an assumption. The Lands Department has made a decision, and we know that there is the need for a specific proposal. So the requirements are clear. We have invited the applicant to attend the meeting, and I think we can try to find out whether, say for example, noise would be a concern, and then we can find ways to solve the problem. The proposals would differ. Sometimes you may get an application to say that they want to have cooked food at night. So proposals do differ in their specific details. But currently, I think they're talking about daytime dry goods. I'm sure it won't be too controversial. It is more likely to be acceptable. So proposals do differ. We can't say that in the absence of a specific proposal and you expect approval to be given. This isn't quite the case. I just wonder why it has taken so many years before we have the first approval. I hope that the bazaars can be sort of permitted when the circumstances permit. For this case, it has taken a long time, a few years. Now, of course, the cases may differ. Maybe for the first case, it requires the approval of the DC, and then for subsequent ones, maybe we only need the approval of the local DC member. I think the FHD hasn't made it clear, and so we find it very difficult to move forward. What is meant by support? A meeting, minutes, or a specific document? We don't know. Well, I'm sure the deputations know better than me, so I won't take up more time. Ms. Chiu, 4 minutes. Let me comment on what Mr. Fogg has said. Now, at Kwai Ching, I think they have also moved a motion to allow a park to be used as a site for bazaar. Organizations became aware and then they submitted applications. At that time, they carried a motion without naming a specific organization. For the North District, they've already given approval in a general nature. The only outstanding issue was the land status. So I don't know why the FHD consulted the DC again. And then from Mr. Fox's point about case-by-case approach, different bazaars have a different positioning. Well, I think we have to tell whether they're selling cooked food, dry food, or wet goods. And second, the timing, at night, in the morning, daytime, or what. And thirdly, the question of noise. But I think all such sort of universal requirements. Maybe the FHD can sort of have a checklist. Now, we have got 150 locations in hundreds of housing estates. We can list out all the soccer pitches and pleasure grounds of the LCSD, and then you consult all the 18 district councils, ask them which would be acceptable as locations for daytime bazaars or the sale of dry goods, and which would be amenable to cooked food and or night markets. Well, by having such a list, then I hope the department would not block the applications on the ground of DC objection. I think this is much better than having a so-called case-by-case basis and then making proponents apply and the district council giving approval. Now, sometimes at the district level there would be objection, and some owners would also object. I think it is your duty to narrow the gap of disagreement. In 2016, we suggested 8 locations in Tongchong, and then 6 related to housing department locations. Some involved the link route. In principle, we got the support of the district council members. At the end of the day, the HD gave us a paper saying that it involved the property of Linkrit. Linkrit is against it, and so we're not able to have bazaars. We don't know why Linkrit is objecting, and the HD doesn't facilitate any dialogue between us and the Linkrit to see if there's room for changes. And then the LCSD also said that the playground is highly popular, and so the application has been turned down. But at that time, we haven't yet named the dates of the bazaar. So perhaps the LCSD should also tell us about the unreasonable ground of rejecting an application. I think they should talk to the applicants directly. You can't simply dismiss the application saying that it is highly popular and the bookings are full. We know that you are having this so-called case-by-case basis because you have your own rules and your own policies. I do think it's right for you to let us explore in the dark. We are not unique. If you have got all the chairmen of the 18 district councils to attend this meeting, they would also have a lot of grievance. They don't know where they should discuss the matter, and district councils find it difficult to say yes or no. Even district council members are not aware of your general requirements. It means that it's very difficult to promote bazaars.
She mentioned that it is the lack of a universal rules among departments, and the DC not aware of that. So I would leave it at that because I have limited time. And pass it on to Mr. Lee. And then before the government to respond, and before I hand it to Mr. Lee, I just let me to respond. Until we do the traffic congestion, we start the meeting 15 minutes late, and the as the venue permits, so they would extend the meeting for 15 minutes for now. I've asked the staff to follow up on HT web for the form that would mention to be distributed to attendees right away, because it is quite most advanced, we're not available now. I hope that after the meeting, the form could provide to the subcommittee so that we can let the attendees know which form it is. So I have had to Mr. Lee. For the case by case, well, let's say it should be people by people. You claim you have proposals, so if you have a universal rule, I would just apply it based on the universal requirements. The lack of universal requirements, as for the first bazaars, in the process, I've used a lot of time to guess your requirements. My colleagues are really just volunteers at guessing what the other departments want. Until most recently, the controller have actually done quite a lot of extra work, or actually pick up my calls and resolve a lot of issues. I guess to a certain extent, the controller could work with HED to serve as a designated coordinator. And there's too many complicated issues. I do understand this is rather a new matter. However, two things are quite important. First of all, there will be a universal requirements. Second, there will be an expert or a platform to be provided. Otherwise, there are too many matters to be resolved. We're still able to promote local flavors, whether raw or cooked. And on a district level, and some people, district members have complained to say, "Could you just stop submitting proposals to the DC because it would disrupt the meeting schedule?" Does it really require to submit the discussion at a council meeting, or rather at a subcommittee level, or for the consulted local member? And when we actually had the consultation at the local level, and the council members have. The DC members have said claim that we will support as long as the FEHD have given out licenses, and then when we ask the FEHD, it's the other way around. That I couldn't grasp. A lot of occasions that make the everything pretty tight. For example, so at the end we just make it go for it. So at the end, whether it would a successful breakout, or the some people, district council have been quite vague. We claim that as long as you fulfill less requirements, that would go ahead. I think the whole thing is too ambiguous. That's the government need to be quite clear about that. Even though the bazaar was successful, but in the process, I've used a lot of manpower to achieve this. We took into account of this. The math doesn't make sense. It wouldn't actually alleviate the poverty. And at the Tonsho Street Bazaar, we actually lost $30,000 to $40,000 because at the last minute there are a lot of requirements. I hope I could organize that in the Lunar New Year. I would purchase a lot of equipment to meet the license requirement of different departments and so on. And our organization needs to do fundraising to meet that. Otherwise, they'll be making a loss, or even break even. And for the last bazaar last Saturday, there's a single parent. He worked in the two bazaars. She said that she could finally afford a computer for her son. But this time, they would due to weather conditions and make less money. However, he WhatsApped me this morning that we have to mention this, even though we're making a very small profit, we feel that bazaar should continue because it's to help a lot of grassroots and help the government be aware of this. And finally, let me reiterate that from Kuala Night Bazaar to the crackdown on the riots and so on, help the government and the chamber, instead of focusing on the complaints and put a brakes to them, help to promote the culture in the government or in the legislative bodies to achieve something. Therefore, a universal requirement as well as an expert and working with the public is quite important. Any supplement for members? If not, let me just summarize, and we'd like the administration to respond, because all along that of course the DC would have its role at the local level. However, they're not know what the demands are. So whether for FEHT or the administration, when vetting a bazaar application, and how can the DC meet your requirements, or maybe for the first time they don't have such experience, they could discuss at the council level where they would accept dry or wet or night market to discuss for once, and then later on when there is submit concrete proposals for the local member to consider without a green light. It's just one of the proposals that I'm proposing. However, the DC is not aware of any universal requirement. And of all this meeting, we to emphasize with our DC member ourselves, even they would not know what the requirements are. Even though the situation each district is different, however, there has to be established universal requirements and prefer with a lower threshold. Otherwise, the threshold bazaar would not survive. These are really blood and sweat work. If not for their belief, they would not be happening. And once it has successful, it could really greatly help the grassroots. I hope the different departments, especially FEHD, their role of assistant would be more proactive, and the requirements should be clear to let the DCs know and what is the minimum documentation proof, or if not, or what is way of discussing and so on. And HDA should submit clearer documentation that would be necessary. We'd like to relevant government representative to respond to deputations. Let me respond first, and I will pass on to the relevant departments if you'd like to respond. As I heard, there are a lot of views on the support of DC and the FEHT frontline controller. There's some issues with the communications that I must inform the representatives and the chairman. Secretary Ko had a meet with the vice chairman and chairman of DC, discussed the bazaars, and also on the principle of bottom-up and district-led, and welcome DC's to forward and approve proposals, which we will follow up. And going back on the different practice on different DCs. For example, in some DCs, there was a working group to follow up on the bazaar applications. That could be the practice of some DCs, and some other they could have different methodologies. And through this time, FEHT could work with different controller at the district level to discuss so-called universal rules or principles that were applicable across different districts. That we need the help of HAD, because we could not lead the DCs in this way. So at the DC level, the HAD could let us know what sort of process DC wish to go through to obtaining support, and notify our controllers. And under such situation, please initiate and work with the applications. That is something we could work on. And furthermore, on the complexity of the procedures, as well as this ambiguity and standards, that would try to enhance as much as possible. They could, whether on the issue of time or rather as last minute, there's different departments could improve on that. That we could understand the applicant could put a lot of effort into it, and especially the first time, because a lot of regulatory requirements that must be complied with, and could be not easy to understand. And from the aviation's perspective, we would want that to happen. This is our objective, and of course, we may come across any obstacles or hurdles. We hope that we can work together under this goal. And let me supplement this. For example, FEHD have been requesting over concrete proposals that are reflected to you. What do you mean by concrete? And this concrete proposal is actually as a layout floor plan that wasn't made aware in the past. Thus, things would need to be transparent and clearly spelled out. What is the role of DC? At least, let's say it was a documentation, or rather was a resolution, or what's the role played by the local member, or the basic requirement of FEHD. That would be necessary. And the Secretary mentioned the HAD had a role to play here. And how do you tie in with FEHD and FHB's work? Even Secretary Ko had discussed with each on the DCs as well. What's the district-led and bottoms-up? This phrase is rather abstract and quite hard to come to practice. Can HAD here help the DCs to set up a consistent guidelines to discuss bazaars? Mr. Yang?
Let me take this opportunity to respond to what the petitions have said, and this about the role of the district councils. In particular, Ms. Chiu has put it rightly. That is, the district council is only advisory in nature. It hasn't got the power to give approval. So there's no hard and fast rule as to what sort of procedures they have to go through to indicate their support on bazaars. Now, when you go to a district council, the applicant will be sitting in the public gallery. Who will propose the paper? It will be the FHD. So the FHD will provide a paper to the DC. So they want to gather the views of the district council and to see whether there is support in principle. My understanding is that the next step is to approach the venue owner. After you've got the support, in principle support of the district council, they will move on to the venue owner. In other words, the HAD is being positive here. You also think that district councils are not there to give approval. So the FHD has to tell the district council that the district council isn't the decision maker. The power rests with the FHD. So it's a matter of the DC will provide input so that the applicant will take on board the concerns of the DC. We started 15 minutes late, and so we are extending the minute by 15 minutes. The chairman has the power to do so. Are you objecting to this? I think you are being most unreasonable in chairing the meeting. It's a point of order. You have exceeded the meeting time. You have to explain why you're still continuing with the meeting. Well, the powers of a chairman may extend the meeting time by 15 minutes. I've already explained. When I extended the meeting by 15 minutes, I've already given an explanation. When you raised the question, it was just beyond 1 o'clock. It is now 1 o'clock. It is 3 minutes past 1. Any objection to my proposal to have another 10 minutes? We haven't got a quorum. Owing to a lack of quorum, we cannot put the matter to the vote. you raised your point at the right time, so perhaps we need to wind up the meeting. Just now, Mr. Yam has given the final reply on behalf of the HAD. So the FHD should play a role. Maybe Mr. Fogg can tell us how we can have clearer guidelines. So I think the meeting can come to a close, and we will ask for papers from the HAD. So we have extended the meeting by 15 minutes, and we have ended the meeting at the right time. Thank you, Mr. Ho, for your advice, which is timely.